What up, y'all? Oh, we actually have got some X chats on Twitter. That's neato. Been waiting for that to happen. All right, guys, hang on a second. Let me, as they say, cross some T's, dot some I's, add a misleading thumbnail so that people will join this on YouTube. You know, the usual. Turn the monetization on because YouTube is where I do get most of my viewers. And away we go. Hello and welcome aboard the Gallant Says podcast. It is Monday, December 18th, 2023, 10:55 Central Time, live at youtube.com/PaulGallant, twitch.tv/Gallant Says, X at Gallant Says, or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, Instagram at Sports Gallant, Facebook, facebook.com/PaulGallantSports. And if I'm not lazy, it'll be up wherever you get your podcasts by tomorrow morning. Apple, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, SoundCloud. If you haven't already, like, subscribe, please, for the love of God. I'm trying to feed my cat. And if you ever have a question, gallantsays@gmail.com. Let's read the first comment of the day. Tony says, don't you miss covering the Seahawks in primetime? They are fun, and I'm not going to lie. Going to Lumen Field, it is unique. You heard Scott Van Pelt. It was his first experience there tonight. If you were watching the Monday Night Football post-game show on ESPN, let's be honest, Seattle fans do like to smell their own farts a little bit. Very smart fan base. Maybe that's why you guys didn't like me that much. But Lumen feels legit. Anyway, on tonight's show, talk about what the Houston Texans need to do to make the playoffs once more of us join, and an all-time hot take on one of the most important events in American history. But I did want to bring up some quick Seahawks-Eagles thoughts. Pretty cool to see that Pete Carroll is still very good coaching in primetime. I liked covering Pete Carroll, getting to interview Pete Carroll after every single game when I was doing the radio show up in Seattle with Danny O'Neill. I enjoyed him. Was he always truthful with us? No, like all coaches, lie right to your face. But I always enjoyed the amount of time that he gave us, the kind of access he did, some of the stuff that he would tell us off the air. He was always, I thought, in spite of criticism, exceptionally fair with me, and obviously with Danny, who has a much longer relationship with. He is 8-0 all time against the Philadelphia Eagles. And I remember a couple of those Seahawks victories over the Eagles when I was up there. If you remember, the Seahawks were injuring Eagles quarterbacks when they played against them. I feel like there was a moment where Carson Wentz got hurt by Jadeveon Clowney, and I know for anyone following in Houston, Clowney once hurt an Eagles quarterback. So, like, Eagles fans really don't like Jadeveon Clowney. And there once was a moment where Danny, after I think the Seahawks beat the Eagles in the playoffs, Danny was actually at the game, and Jadeveon Clowney said, "Bye, Eagles, bye." And was basically talking through Danny to my mom, who's an Eagles fan but thought Clowney was mean. Things I don't miss about Seattle, though, that looked like it would have been miserable to watch a game in. The Seattle cold rain of the Pacific Northwest from November to April, I don't miss that shit at all. Not one bit. I will take the burning hot summer so that I could get the nice winters, because this is a pretty nice day today. Kenneth Walker had me thinking about something in this game, because Kenneth Walker had a really good game for Seattle. The statistics for him, 19 carries for 86 yards and a touchdown, 3 catches for 26 yards as well. Was a big part of the first of the 2 touchdown drives that Seattle had in the second half. When I see Kenneth Walker, I wonder, like, how mad would Seahawks fans have been if the Seahawks drafted him in the first round instead of the second round? Because Seahawks fans are fun in that I don't think I've ever seen a fan base that's more divided. It seems like they like to reenact the American political system at all times. Everything's black and white. There's no room for the middle. There's no room for nuance. You got to pick a side. I remember when I first got there, it was, should the Seahawks let Russ cook? Or was Pete Carroll in the right? And I went through an interesting journey on that front. I went in thinking the Seahawks needed to let Russ cook. And as I covered the Seahawks more and more, I thought, well, maybe, just maybe, the Seahawks should, I don't know, run the ball to set up play action because Russell Wilson's really good at throwing the football downfield. And then I got really annoyed with Russell Wilson in that offseason before his last year in Seattle. I ended up getting canned before that last season began. But anyway, they like to divide themselves over things like whether or not you should draft a running back in the first round. There are some, the analytically inclined, who are like, you never fucking do that ever, you stupid idiot. Fuck you if you think you should. And that's why I kind of wish that they had drafted him in the first round, because I enjoyed the back and forth on Seahawks Twitter. And then the last drive of this game happened. And look, I'm not going to act like I've been watching a lot of Seahawks football this year. I only get to watch the games in primetime. And I do miss a very, 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 very passionate fan base that I hope Houston Texans fans will eventually be someday. They're not. But Drew Lock versus Geno Smith. I can't fucking wait. I'm already seeing it online. I'm already seeing some of you guys bracing for all sorts of Drew Lock stands who come out of the woodwork to say that he should be starting over Geno Smith. And honestly, is there a big difference between the two? Geno's clearly been a better pro. Clearly. Drew's had some moments. All quarterbacks who are in the NFL have had moments from time to time. But I can't wait to take a look at the old Seattle timeline and see people putting up gloves to say, you know what, no, it's got to be Geno Smith instead of Drew Lock. And I did not think that I would be in this position, especially considering we just saw the Houston Texans start Case Keenum on Sunday against the Houston Oilers / Tennessee Titans. But here we are, and I guess I'm covering the team with the better quarterback situation. So there you go. More comments here. Todd the Show comments on twitch.tv/Gallant says the Eagles are frauds. Yeah, 3 losses in a row. Not looking great. And they barely beat the Buffalo Bills in overtime, too. So, I mean, that could have been 4 losses in a row. More comments. Todd the Show says, the Astros fan base has achieved enough success now to be divided, too. Maybe that's the case, but growing up a Patriots fan, it never felt like Patriots fans were divided on anything. Like, there was a brief moment in time with Brady versus Bledsoe, but that didn't last very long. I feel like everyone has been unified with all of the cheating accusations that the Patriots have dealt with over the years. Now, maybe things have changed because I don't really follow the Patriots the same way I used to growing up. It's just hard to do it when every single Sunday you're focused on one specific NFL team. The Texans for a while, then the Seahawks, then the Texans again. And I'll be honest, like I just don't watch the Patriots as much as I used to. But it always felt like it was an us against the world kind of deal that the Astros fans used to have. But now all of a sudden, yeah, it seems like this past year, especially with the Martin Maldonado stuff, although most people were very firmly like, yeah, Maldonado probably plays a little bit too much. Dusty Baker, I think, is where it was perhaps a little bit more nuanced. Anyway, guys, so people were asking me this right after the Texans beat the Titans yesterday. And more people were asking on today's show. And I wanted to focus on Sunday's game before I looked at the playoff picture because, I'll be honest, it's confusing to me. I don't have that big of a brain, you know? Like, I sometimes talk and I sound like I'm smart. I don't know if I'm really that smart, you know? So I look at specifically the playoff scenarios and know that really it doesn't matter until the last 2 weeks of the season when you've got an absolute smorgasbord or clusterfuck or whatever you want to call it like you have in the AFC right now. So, for the sake of making this a little easier for me, let's assume that the Baltimore Ravens, the Miami Dolphins, the Kansas City Chiefs, let's all assume that those teams have won their division and we're just talking about actual playoff berths. The Ravens are up by 2 games on Cleveland. The Dolphins are up by 2 games on Buffalo. The Chiefs are up by 2 games on the Denver Broncos. So, of all the teams that are vying for wild card spots right now, or I guess potentially the AFC South. 5 seed, Cleveland Browns, they're 9-5. Their remaining schedule, at Houston, against the Jets, and at Cincinnati. Their game against the Texans is important for the Texans to make the playoffs. And it's one of a couple of reasons why I feel like the best way for the Texans to make the playoffs, shocker, is win the rest of your fucking games. What a shocker, right? But you're going to make it a lot easier for yourself if you do that. If you're leaving it in the hands of others, it might not come so easy. Then you got at 8-6 the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Jaguars are leading the three-way tie at 8-6 atop the AFC South with the Colts and the Texans because they're 2-0 against the Colts and 1-0 against the Texans. That's enough. If the Texans had won that game against Jacksonville to give them what would have been their 4th straight loss, the Colts still would be in first place. The Texans would be in second. The Jaguars would be out. And, I mean, the Jaguars have almost, just like the Eagles, lost 4 in a row. Their schedule the rest of the way. At Tampa Bay, Carolina, at Tennessee. That's a very easy last couple of games. And those easy last couple of games, I think, are going to help them ultimately win the AFC South. I just think it's going to be really hard for them to lose one of those 3. I guess the Bucs are playing scrappy, but the Panthers got to win against Atlanta. Are they really going to do that again? And Tennessee. Do we see Tennessee winning? I don't know. Then you got the 6 seed Cincinnati Bengals. Their schedule the rest of the way at Pittsburgh, at KC, against Cleveland. I think all the Seahawks fans that are also UW fans that are watching this on Twitter or YouTube or whatever, I'm sure that there's a little part of you that's been fist pumping for the Bengals. And I really enjoyed their victory over the Vikings, even though that may have hurt the Texans' ability to make the playoffs on Saturday. That was a hell of a game. And I don't know, there's something about me that likes a team that has made the playoffs the last couple of years, scrapping and clawing and trying to fight their way in despite their star quarterback, one of the best in the game, going down. It is a team game after all, as obviously you Seahawks fans that are watching right now know, with Drew Lock winning, and Texas fans too, with Case Keenum winning the game for them on Sunday. The 7th seed, it's the Colts at Atlanta, Vegas, Houston the rest of the way. Those first 2 games are pretty easy. For the Texans, the 8th seed at 8-6, Cleveland, Tennessee, at Indianapolis the rest of the way. Cleveland's 9-5. Tennessee, obviously, that game was no pushover. They have some good players, and they just played them, and obviously it came down to the wire. If CJ Stroud's under center, would it have been a more convincing win? I honestly don't know. And then at the Colts to end the year, the Colts, of course, beat the Texans in week 2 in a rather convincing victory that Shane Steichen looked a lot better than D'Amico Ryans, but it's almost a full season's worth of games in between those two. And then the 9 seed, the Buffalo Bills, they're also 8-6 at the Chargers, New England, at Miami. I feel like the Bills are going to find their way back in. Those next 2 games are very easy for them. So you look at those schedules and you look at those teams. Cincinnati's the one that's going to have the toughest time, I think, the remaining games. Pittsburgh's still fighting for a playoff spot. They have a road game against them this coming Sunday. At Kansas City, listen, that's a personal rivalry for the Bengals, as made very insufferable by all the trash talk. What was, what wasn't trash talk going up to last year's playoff matchup. Did they call it Burrowhead Stadium out there? They like that, all that fucking stupid stuff. God, that was annoying. And then they have Cleveland. So Cincinnati has the toughest schedule the rest of the way, 100%. So all those 8-6 teams are competing with one another, and for the sake of making my life easier / Paul's lazy, fuck the Steelers and Broncos. We'll figure it out if they're hanging around next week, okay? So the tie-breaking procedures in the NFL are kind of tricky, and I think that's what had a lot of people wondering what the fuck was going on after yesterday's game. Because basically, when the Texans had won that game, they looked in some playoff pictures or in the Hunt graphics like they were in the playoffs. But then as the day progressed, they found themselves on the outside looking in. So The tricky thing for the Texans right now is that even though they've beaten the Cincinnati Bengals, their problem is that they are in third place. They're behind the Colts. And the Bengals have beaten the Colts. So that throws a big wrench in all of it. The first tiebreaker when we're talking about 3 teams or more is where the 2 teams are in that tie that are in the same division. Say if Cleveland also is 8-6, this would really be a clusterfuck. But the Texans are behind the Bengals and the Colts entirely because the Colts have won the one game between these 2 teams. It's very dumb because obviously the Texans are going to play the Colts the last game of the year. So everything you see right now, you got to take it with a grain of salt. Pause me. I'm going to sneeze for a second. That was nasty. Anyway, if the Texans win out, as I said before, they're golden because they'll have that tiebreaker over the Colts. They already have that tiebreaker over the Bengals. They'd have a tiebreaker over the Cleveland Browns. 2 wins could do it, though. They just have to beat the Titans and the Colts and then get a little bit of help, and that help could come courtesy of just beating the Colts the last game of the year. So, Indy holds the tiebreaker at 1-0 against the Texans. But after that, say the Texans and Colts have the same record and the Texans beat them in the last game of the season, it's about your record in common games. And here's where it's close once again. The Texans and Colts will play, or have played, Baltimore, Jacksonville, Pittsburgh, Atlanta, New Orleans, Carolina, Tampa Bay, Cincinnati, Cleveland, and Tennessee. Right now, the Ravens, the Texans lost to them. The Colts beat them. The Jaguars, Texans split with them. The Colts lost to them twice. The Colts have beaten Tennessee twice. The Texans have only played them once. They're 1-0. I know. I need like a chart behind me, don't I? The Texans lost to the Falcons. The Colts are about to play the Falcons. The Texans beat the Saints. The Colts lost to the Saints. The Texans lost to the Panthers. The Colts beat the Panthers. The Texans and Colts beat the Bucks. The Texans beat the Bengals. The Colts lost to the Bengals. The Texans beat the Steelers. The Colts beat the Steelers. So, it's about the common game winning percentage. Houston is 6-4. Indy is 6-5. The Texans still play Cleveland and Tennessee. They got 2 games left. The Colts play at Atlanta. So those games are the tiebreaker. Say the Texans and Colts both end the year with the same divisional record or with the same divisional record and the same actual record as well. And if they split the series with each other. Isn't it confusing as fuck? I feel like I'm CJ Stroud with a concussion. Let's read some comments here. YouTube.com/Paul Gallant. Matt, I hope that was a sufficient explanation of why the Texans are behind the Bengals if they beat them. But it's because the Texans lost to the Colts. The Colts have the tiebreaker over the Texans because they lead the division. And the Bengals, for whatever reason, because we're talking about a multi-team tie, the Bengals since they beat the Colts. They have the tiebreaker over the Colts. It's really dumb. It's going to resolve itself by the end of the year. Vincent Zunija comments, you think CJ plays against the Browns? Honestly, I wish I could tell you. I don't fucking know, man. I don't know. What else do we have? Half Nielsen, see any nice boobs lately, Paul? No, it's been a minute. It's been a minute for your boy. Joseph Ramos comments that it wishes it was more visible, like baseball's tie-breaking procedures. It's there, but you can go read it at NFL.com/standing/tie-breaking-procedures. That's the best explanation, and it's going to confuse the shit of you. I feel like I haven't helped you out at all. At all. So just win it out. Just win out. Okay? Not a Doctor says, any chance we beat the Browns with Case Keenum? Well, yeah, it's Joe Flacco. The real question is, who's going to turn the football over more? Keenum got lucky on a lot of plays on Sunday. He is a gambler. Behind that offensive line, though, I think they need Keenum because I don't think Davis Mills has the ability to move to escape the rush. Keenum can extend plays and make things happen. Not by running, but just by getting out of the pocket. I think he's got more of a gunslinger mentality. You're not going to be able to beat the Browns just by running the football. If I had to pick straight up between the two, not knowing the spread off the top of my head right now, I would probably pick Cleveland on Sunday. But I picked Tennessee on Sunday too. And then I picked the Texans as a lock over the Jets. I think the tricky thing with the Texans this year is nothing is certain. They play a lot of close games. Another close game on Sunday. That's 9 of their last 10 that were one score. And it's a shame because none of the AFC's best teams look unbeatable, right? I mean, who's playing best right now? Baltimore's won 4 in a row, but we could be talking about them entirely differently when they play San Francisco this coming Monday. And then after that, Miami. Miami has won 4 of 5, but they had that collapse against the Dolphins. They're about to play Dallas at Baltimore and then Buffalo. So I think a lot of us think the Dolphins are frauds, right? Is it fair? Probably not, but there is, I think, a bias against Miami until they win a big game that matters, until they have a playoff victory. You could say the same thing about the Ravens, too. Buffalo, meanwhile, it's kind of the same deal, right? Like, every year, Buffalo gets hyped. This year, they were a disaster, but then all of a sudden, they beat KC and Dallas back-to-back after an overtime loss to Philly after Thanksgiving. And amazingly, they're 2-0 since Sean McDermott was revealed to have once used the hijackers on 9/11 as an example of teamwork. They're 2-0 since then. Obviously, this has been something that they've known about in-house for a little bit and have probably laughed about. So those 3 teams are probably the best 3, at least based off of what they've done for us lately in the AFC. Kansas City, meanwhile, has lost 3 of 5. They've lost to Philly. They've lost to Green Bay. They've lost to Buffalo. And Cleveland, Cincy, and Indy are all playing tough, but they're quarterbacked by Joe Flacco, Jake Browning, and Gardner Minshew. I don't know who the best team in the AFC is. It's wide open. I don't think the Texans are a lock against any of these teams, but I think the possibilities actually are unlimited for the Texans in the playoffs. I don't think that there's any like concrete ceiling that they're not going to be able to potentially get over, where it would be impossible. Kansas City's offense isn't the same, and I think their defense is finding out that they can't carry Kansas City's offense all game long, especially with all the receiver issues, and Travis Kelce's not having the same kind of year that we've seen from him in the past. Obviously, Kansas City is probably the team we trust the most going into these playoffs, but I think that the Texans would have a chance in a playoff game against any of those teams. I just think they're going to have to win out to really make their job easier to get in. Let's read some more comments here. YouTube.com/Paul Gallant or Twitch.tv/Gallant says, Waka Flocka Buck says, I don't want to see Myles Garrett running up on CJ. I don't either. Somebody put together a reel or a montage of all the times that Myles Garrett got held on Sunday, which is pretty interesting to see because I guess it didn't get called once. Joseph Ramos brings up that Trevor Lawrence is in the concussion protocol. If you're asking me for more clarity on that, I don't know, guys. I really don't know. It does seem like teams are being a lot more cautious with quarterbacks in the concussion protocol than they've been in years past. Maybe that concussion explains that weird-ass fumble that Lawrence had. I was thinking to myself, what's a good comparison for Trevor Lawrence, who is definitely a good quarterback, but is clearly not a great quarterback, much to the chagrin of all those Jaguars fans who got in my mentions after the Texans beat the Jaguars, and Lawrence clearly looked second fiddle to C.J. Stroud, just from an overall ability standpoint. Lawrence reminds me of Donovan McNabb. Here's why. There's no denying that he's good at a lot of different things. He can run. He's got a pretty good arm. But he'll have some really bad misfires, an overthrow, an underthrow. And when he turns the football over, it's catastrophic. It's a fumble. And every single account that I get from Eagles fans who watched Donovan McNabb when McNabb was quarterbacking that team, they would just complain and bitch and moan about the times that McNabb would throw a ball in the dirt or overthrow a guy. That's Lawrence's biggest problem. And I think that's what Jaguars fans have to deal with, is that he's good, but he's probably never going to be a top 5 quarterback. 3 years is a pretty good sample size. And that game against Baltimore Sunday night, like, he really struggled. 12 points that could have been on the board in the first half just weren't there because of fumbles and poor clock management and moments of airheadedness by Lawrence. I don't know what the hell he was thinking throwing to that receiver in bounds. Throw it away, man. Live for the field goal. Anyway, we'll see what's up with Trevor Lawrence and if that potentially opens the door for the Texans winning the division outright. Jacksonville looks ripe for the picking. Indy's been playing tough, though. We'll see how they fare without Michael Pittman. Man, that hit on Michael Pittman. Holy shit. I just saw it today. Did not see it in the moment on Saturday. Wow. What a hit. Sports Hulk is saying Trevor is not clutch. Christian Velas says, is it time to start a dialogue about the defensive line without Will Anderson? Look, they played well on Sunday. You're better off with Will Anderson. Don't get it twisted. The more guys that you can throw on the defensive line, the better. Texas had a clear game plan, and they just executed it to perfection. I think Christian Harris had a hell of a game. At linebacker, he was violent. He was flying to the football. He was jawing with Derrick Henry a couple of times. It's pretty good. Manny Monsoon comments on youtube.com/Paul Gallant. It'll definitely be a battle of defenses. Once again, talking about Texans-Browns, I'm guessing if the D plays like they played against the Titans, we got that in the bag. I think it's going to need more than that. I think you're going to need takeaways. You had one takeaway. You had the interception by Steven Nelson, but there were some opportunities that the Texans could have had more in that game. And it's one of those games where you look back at it and you know it was the best defensive performance of the year. I don't think there's any debate about that. But the problem is you got to get takeaways. Joe Flacco's going to give you opportunities. You're probably going to need to score on some of them too. Can you win a game when your offense is taking that long to get going and when your offense is just Devin Singletary? Yeah, I think the Browns would be able to neutralize Devin Singletary. I do. Because that's really all you got if there's no C.J. Stroud in that game. Now, if Stroud plays on Sunday, totally different story. But honestly, we do not know what's going on that front. Marverin, youtube.com/Paul Gallant, comments, sucks that the Texans just haven't beaten the team we should have beat this year, a.k.a. the Atlanta, the Panthers, and the Jets. Yeah, you ain't kidding. I mean, if they'd beaten Carolina or Atlanta, those two, like they were close games. They came down to the wire, but those are inexplicable. Like, I'm still trying to figure out how that happened. Todd the Show brings up Devin Singletary out of the backfield. Yeah, that catch and run that he had for 41 was huge. But can you do that every single play? Because that was one of those plays where Case Keenum extended the play for a while. And if you got a running back on a check down route after extending the play for a while, of course, that guy's probably going to catch it and run. Christian Velez comments, Brock Purdy clinched MVP after the Eagles lost today. By the way, I don't know. It seems like Jalen Hurts had kind of fallen out of that discussion. I suppose who else are you going to make an argument for as MVP over Brock Purdy? I'm just going to take a look at some stats and passing. Tua doesn't have a marquee win, which hurts him. He leads the league in passing yards. He leads the league in completion percentage. But Brock Purdy, incredibly, leads the NFL in touchdown passes and 7 interceptions. I think Dak Prescott's the guy who took the biggest hit on Sunday because of what happened to his Cowboys against the Bills. I would keep an eye on Josh Allen. Allen's thrown a lot of interceptions this year, though. 14. Stroud might be out of it just because he didn't play in this past game. Yeah, I can't argue against it. I want to argue against it. Tyreek Hill missing a little bit of time doesn't help either. It does look like it's very unlikely that he's going to get to 2,000 yards receiving. Definitely not impossible with 3 games left, but he's got 1,542 yards. He's going to need 150 plus in his last 3 games. That's going to be hard to do. And yeah, I don't think you're going to give it to Christian McCaffrey. Nothing he's done is that impressive. What does Christian McCaffrey have from a receiving perspective? Is he up there towards the top? He's not high enough. So there you go, guys. MVP conversation. Huzzah! Individual over the team. Marverin says, one advantage we can hope is that Flacco hasn't been accurate. He's prone to toss picks. With this team getting a pick or two, could be enough to win. Yep, but also, he threw 3 interceptions this past game. Is he going to throw 3 interceptions the next game? Is Kevin Stefanski going to put that much on his plate where it's possible for him to throw that many? I don't know. Joseph Ramos comments, we need to clean up the penalties after big plays. The offensive line had some big penalties, as was annoyingly pointed out by Spiro Ditas and Adam Archuleta on the call. All right, guys. I wanted to discuss something because I saw an article and it made me laugh. And on the same day, I saw this story about how some fan at a Patriots-Chiefs game, she claimed that she was being harassed and bullied because she was wearing a Taylor Swift jacket to the game. I got to be honest, I don't even know what a Taylor Swift jean jacket looks like. Is it that different than your average jean jacket? I also thought that her thread talking about how she's like a Patriots fan, but she's a Chiefs fan because she's supporting Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce is fucking lame. You're fucking lame, dude. These Taylor Swift people are such fucking losers. I get it. Like, you love her, the musician, but this putting her on a pedestal that her fans do, it's weird to me. I don't get it. Like, she's a lot like you guys. A human being that has struggled with love relationships for her entire life. Do you need to put her on a pedestal because she sings a lot of catchy songs? Do you need to root for her as a sports fan because she's dating some guy? You don't know her. You're not part of her family. I don't get it. And I also just think that this girl claiming that she was getting harassed by Patriots fans at Gillette Stadium is full of shit. One, that's a wine and cheese crowd at Gillette Stadium. I would know. I went to the games and I saw the decline of that being like a hostile seeming place filled with sarcastic shit talkers and how it transitioned into a place that's a very expensive ticket. And now all of a sudden it's a rainy day. Who the fuck was going to a Patriots-Chiefs game when they knew what was going to happen to the Patriots in that one? Every Patriots fan, myself included, knew what was going to happen. So I call bullshit on her. But look, there's a lot of stories about how Boston sports fans are assholes or racist, et cetera, et cetera. I did not think, though, that all of a sudden my brethren from the 1770s would get thrown under the bus. I got to say, though, I respect the shit out of this zag in the Washington Post from Theodore Johnson. The title read, "Was the Boston Tea Party an act of terrorism? It depends." Fuck yeah, dude. What a tease. I mean, that's going to get every single person from Boston, a city that's pretty sensitive about being perceived as racist, even if it is a little bit. But now you're calling the people, the Patriots, not the New England Patriots, though. They'd probably get mad about that a couple of years ago. You're calling the Patriots who founded our country terrorists? How dare you? So unfortunately for this Theodore Johnson guy, before the article even starts, it's behind a paywall. So anyone who aggregates this article, I mean, you can say whatever you want. So if you're Fox News or a very right-leaning publication, you could say that this guy's full of shit and give a couple of tidbits of the article. I read the whole article for the sake of context, because I wonder if a guy who's writing an editorial is the one that's also suggesting the very clickbaity headline. He argues that the Boston Tea Party, which was when a bunch of angry Bostonians, mad that the East India, is it the East India Tea Company? Sorry, I got to look it up. My history skills not serving me well right here. The East India Company had basically monopolized tea and the selling of it so that people in the colonies had to buy from the East India Company. It actually was going to be cheaper, but you had to buy from them. And people in Boston were like, fuck this. So they dressed up as Native Americans, got on a boat, dumped the tea in the harbor. Johnson, this guy in this article, argues that the event became a myth over time, which it probably did become. This happened, 260 years ago? No one's alive to remember what went down. No one saw it that's still alive. But this is where it gets fun, this article that I read and that I wanted to be fair to. East India Trading Company. Thank you, Joseph Ramos. The story of that night became lore, and the lore evolved into national myth. The Boston Tea Party has come to symbolize the revolutionary spirit that led to independence and engraved the catchphrase, "No taxation without representation," on the country's cornerstone and signified the embrace of democracy. Yet, there's another version of the event, one less suitable for national mythology. A horde of white men disguised themselves as Native Americans, coppering their faces and donning headdresses in the same tradition that would lead to black-faced minstrel shows decades later to commit seditious conspiracy and destroy private property. The riotous mob trespassed on 3 ships and destroyed goods worth nearly $2 million in today's money, all because they didn't want to obey a duly passed law. But a duly passed law in England, back in the day, for those who don't know about the history of the American Revolutionary War, 33% wanted out, 33% wanted to stay with England, and 33% were like, I don't know. So this was not as black and white as we make it out to be these days. So to this guy's point, there's been some myth attached to the Boston Tea Party. And he writes a little bit later about how there's a lot of property damage during protests, during the Black Lives Matter protests. There was a lot of damage that was done during the January 6th Capitol insurrection. But the problem is, like, goods worth nearly $2 million in today's money when it's a monopoly that's overseas versus, let's say, the riots from May 26th to June 8th, which caused $1 to $2 billion in insured damages, or the Capitol riot, which amazingly cost $2.7 billion. I was shocked to find that out. Written about the Capitol riot, this amount includes damage to the Capitol building and grounds, costs borne by the Capitol Police, the District of Columbia, and federal agencies, and estimated costs to address security needs and investigations. $2.7 billion? I don't know about that. I feel like that might be an overcalculation. But again, I'm not a part of it. That's just what the government's telling us. We should trust the government at all times. But I get what this guy was trying to say. The problem was the headline became, was the Boston Tea Party an act of terrorism? And I think this guy's trying to say, like, well, the way we look at the Boston Tea Party could be the way that we look at the Black Lives Matter protests or the U.S. Capitol protest. And then that headline becomes the story, though, and it's behind a paywall, and no one wants to get past it. And next thing you know, the left-leaning and right-leaning media, they have their clickbait. A lot of people are going to click on this because they're going to be like, oh, yeah, Boston being racist with blackface? Of course they were in the fucking 1700s. And other people are going to look at it and say, like, what? The Boston Tea Party was terrorism? And that's how all of this stuff works. And it bums me out because this is how we stay divided. The guy was writing something that he thought was interesting, and it's going to get turned into something that it wasn't. Because at the end of this article, he basically says, like, how are we going to view these things years from now? It's an interesting question. Like, that's the final point of his article. And he just throws that question out there. But that's writing in 2023 for you. So there you go. There you go. How many people have stuck around for this? Oh, wow. Lots of people stuck around. Hell yeah. Anyway, guys, I appreciate y'all joining me. I hope I provided some clarity on what the Houston Texans have to do to make the playoffs. And on top of that, for all those Seahawks fans out there, good luck dealing with your own civil war of Drew Lock versus Geno Smith. I will be watching from the sidelines with popcorn. Hey, not a bad problem to have. Seahawks still in the playoff race. Texans still in the playoff race. Did not think I would be saying that on December 18th. Anyway, so long, farewell. This will be available in podcast form once I post it. If you haven't already, please subscribe and like this video, youtube.com/PaulGallant or twitch.tv/Gallant says. I appreciate you joining me on X/Twitter, seeing a couple of you guys in the chat. Not really sure if it allows you to join in and chat with the people on the other platforms. I guess there have been some people watching on my Instagram and on my Facebook. Doesn't seem like there were that many, but whatever the case, I appreciate all the support that y'all give me for this little side project that I don't do nearly regularly enough. I'm going to see if I have time to post something that won't be live on Thursday. I doubt there will be much Texans talk in it. Maybe a little bit of a look ahead to the Browns. But I imagine if I do an episode on Thursday, it is far more likely to be a overzealous breakdown of a Christmas movie to be determined. Anyway, so long, farewell. Have yourselves a wonderful rest of your Monday or entirety of your Tuesday. Have yourselves a Merry Christmas if this is the last time that you check me out, or Happy Holidays, whatever. And you'll hear from me Tuesday, 10 a.m. at ESPN 97.5 and 92.5. Until then.